Today, we're going to talk about one-click deployment with cognitive services. All right, so cognitive services. I've used this in Hackathon, personal project, and actual work, and it's always been amazing, but it's always a little bit problematic as in how do you want to deploy it, right? How do you even get started? That's a good question. The basic stuff before you even start creating resources is you need to create the actual resource before you can use it. So before you even start, you have to find the right service. And once you have the right service, you have to pick a region. So like, what is a region? Why do I even need to pick one? And finally, you have to choose a pricing tier. Like, why am I even choosing a pricing tier? I want the free stuff, right? And you're always wondering, like, I'm not sure. And in the end, everyone always ends up picking up the free stuff in most scenarios. So why would that even be a choice? Especially in our case. So I always love the free stuff. And my question here is, can all of this be made? Can all of this be made simpler? And the answer is a resounding yes. And we want to make this simpler. So there's a few defaults here that we need to set. The first one is the pricing tier. We want a free stuff, so let's go with F0. We're going to set it up as is. And for regions, we don't want this to be complicated. We don't want to have 25 regions. For me, most of the time, it's going to be East US or West US, and I don't really need something else. Of course, what I'm going to show you, you're going to be able to fork that repository and be able to implement the same regions that you're most commonly going to use, so you don't have to bother with all. So let's talk about Azure. There's something in Azure called the Azure Resource Manager. We're going to call this ARM from now on. And it's basically two things. It's a template files and a parameter file. And when you merge those two together, something amazing. It's called a deployed resources. It allows you to deploy resource, which is amazing. So what is this template file? Well, first it defines the input parameters that we're going to be using. It also defines the resources that we're going to be deploying. And there's also more advanced stuff like output and functions, but we're not going to be using those today. And finally, there's the parameter file. This is the most basic one. And this one just defines value for the parameters that you're going to be using. It's as simple as that. All right, so let's do a one-click cognitive project. And I already have one set. So that's the link you have to remember, aka.ms/one-click-cognitive. And with that project, you're going to be able to either fork it or just upgrade my project or do whatever you want with it. And it will allow you to get started real quickly with cognitive services. So what does it contain? Well, it contains those templates. So let's go over one here for computer vision, and I'll show you a little bit later how to deploy it. So the first thing we're going to notice here is that there's basically two sections. There are more, but those are the two that we're going to be using today. Don't bother with the schema and the content version. Like, this is just stuff for the machine. What we're interested about is stuff for the human. And here we have parameters. We have a base name, we have a location. You can see here in the locations, I've already defaulted a value. I want East to West. And I've already set up a list of allowed values like East to West and West to West. If you want to fork that repository and change those values to something more sensible to your region, go ahead. And then I've specified an API type and this queue, and like everything is already predefined. So those parameters, we're not going to be looking at them anymore. We're done. Now we're going to be talking about the resources. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. There's a lot to unpack. So let's go through them. API version. Like, this is always a big question. Like, what the hell is that? And to be honest, you don't really need to care about this. This is just defines the object that we're going to be using right now. It defines the properties and the schema of the resources. And most of the time, the older API version is still going to work. So unless you're using a preview version of the latest thing, you really don't need to care about this. So let's keep that to the latest version. And you will probably not going to need to update this for a very long time. Then we have our name. This is amazing. Like, the name here, like, it will allow you to create a name automatically, autodynamically. I don't know what the kids are using it these days, but what we're going to be using here are called functions. We're going to concatenate the parameters, the base name that we see here, with a unique string that is going to be defined from the resource group in which we're deploying it. This is great because we don't have to pick a name. Like, what name do you want to create it? Like, that's one of the questions that they give you. What name do you want your service to have? I don't know. Like, just pick a name, doesn't matter. So this one automatically generated for you. You don't have to think about it. It's automatic. Then we have our location. And like I said, I just defaulted to East US because this is one of those that I use all the time, but you can change those, and by default, it's already going to be selected. You don't have to pick it. It's already there. And we have our cognitive services account. That's another base property of our resources. This defines the type of resource that we're going to be deploying. This is not going to change much in years. So Microsoft.cognitive service/accounts. That, of course, will not allow us to create a computer vision one, but they're all rounded up into the same type of properties. So that's the fun part with cognitive services, is it defines the types, and then you play with the kind into what you have. So we're going to see this here. There's different type of API. So all cognitive services are all under the same API. And the things that you have here is it allows us to define the API type that we're going to be using. And as you can see here at the top is we've defined computer vision as the default one and the only allowed values that we're going to have. Of course, there are more, and that's the only one we're going to allow people to do. And for RSQ, like I said earlier, this is the version that defines the price you're going to pay. And the default value that I've been using here is F0, which means free. And then there's a custom subdomain name, which we don't really need to bother ourselves about, but it's the same thing for the name. We're going to be using the same value as for the name. So this is not more complicated than what it is. All right, you want to see it in action? Let's do this. So we're going to show you how to use one-click cognitive services here for this repository. So as an example here, I've already set up custom vision, computer vision, face, text analytics, and a whole bunch of other ones. So let's see how they behave. So let's click on deploy to Azure. So this will take us to our portal just after it authenticates. It's going to load up Azure and it's going to refer to our template. So in this case, I have a subscription already selected. I can just create any resource group here. So let's choose do one. Let's call it test. And then I'm going to pick a location for that resource group. So here, anything goes. So let's go with East US. And this is kind of a prefix for our custom vision. So I just named it CV for custom vision. And we also need a name for the prediction name. I have already pre-filled CVP. I don't need to change it. It's just as easy as it is right now. I've already defaulted to East US, but I've also added West US. You could add any of them that you want, but for me, like, all the defaults are pretty good. The only thing we really need to do is to click the I agree and click on purchase. And as soon as you do this, the deployment is actually going to start. And we can click here on deployment in progress to follow on our deployment of our custom vision service. And here you will see the inputs that we've selected for our template. We can actually see the template that we've used. So in this scenario, you will see everything that we had earlier that was selected, as well as the parameters that were passed in. So if you want to replicate this deployment, you would just download this file and reuse the template we used earlier. If you want to automate this, you can use the Azure CLI or even PowerShell to do the same operation. So let's go back to our overview and see if it's completed. So after about a minute, we have this notification now that deployment has succeeded, as well as the deployment details. So we can see here that our CVP and our CV have actually managed to deploy automatically. You can see here by the rest of the name that the unique string has actually been generated exactly the same. That's because we're generating a unique string based on the resource group ID. So it is going to be the same name that's going to be generated every time if you're using the same resource group. Here, we can just click on go to our resource and we will have everything that's pre-generated and ready to use. All right, so I hope you loved this demo. If you want to reach out to me, I'm on Twitter, I'm on GitHub, and obviously you found my YouTube channel or my blog post. I don't know how you watched that video, but definitely, if you want to subscribe to me on Twitter, you can just follow me, or you can subscribe on YouTube or follow me on GitHub. I don't really know. And at that point, thank you so much for being here.